wrapping up our discussion on personality and these different approaches that all attempt to explain the development of the personality or what the personality is the sociocognitive approach. So just break down these terms, right? Sociocognitive. This approach explains personality as being a product of both environmental factors, which influence our behavior. So, how do the situations that we're in, the people around us, the consequences that we receive shape our behavior, as well as cognitive mental processes that are happening. And the first name that we are going to talk about is Albert Bandura. So you may hopefully already remember Bandura from when we learned about observational learning or vicarious learning, how we learn by watching the consequences that other people receive. And depending upon those consequences, we will decide whether or not we should imitate that behavior. So observational learning is learning new responses by watching the behavior of others. You may also remember Bandura when we learned about self-efficacy. Self-efficacy, if your self-efficacy is high, it means you believe you have the ability to do something. If self-efficacy is low, that means you don't believe in your ability to do something. And then finally, this is the new component or the new idea of Bandura that we're introducing in this unit is something called reciprocal determinism. And this is the process by which the person, our behavior, and our environment all mutually influence one another. And we're going to look at an example in a second. But the overarching theme of Bandura, as far as personality is concerned, is the idea that personality is learned in social situations. So we're taking into account for Bandura observational learning, self-efficacy, and now this new term we're learning about, reciprocal determinism. So what is reciprocal determinism? So what is reciprocal determinism? Again, it is the way in which all of these things, our behavior, our environment, and our cognitive and biological factors all mutually influence one another in order to essentially make us who we are. So here's an example of reciprocal determinism. Let's say that I want to go rock climbing, or that my friends ask me to go rock climbing. Let's put it that way. So, an environmental factor that might be influencing my decision to do that, make that part of my repertoire, would be the fact that I have friends who like to do rock climbing, right? I have friends that like to go to rock climbing gyms or like to go on hikes and find places where they can go rock climbing. That might lead to a behavior where I then learn to rock climb. But this might also be influenced by my own internal thoughts and feelings about doing risky activities. So if I'm an individual who, if you remember from one of our previous units, if I'm someone who's a sensation seeker who has this need for adrenaline, that might then predispose me to being more likely to go out and engage in rock climbing, right? So again, like the fact that I have friends though can also influence my thoughts about risks, because now maybe the fact that I know, maybe I'm not naturally a sensation seeker, but the fact that I have friends that rock climb makes me kind of adjust my schema and decide that rock climbing is a safe thing to do, and then that might influence me to learn how to rock climbing. To learn how to rock climb. So not only do the environmental factors influence the way that we think and we feel, the way that we think and we feel can also influence our environmental factors. So the bottom line is just that all three of these things play a role in influencing who we are. You're going to write your own example, and then we will share them in class for reciprocal determinism. Actually, you're going to write two examples. One for a motorist who's been cut off in traffic, and another example for a little boy who bullies his peers on the playground. So again, we're looking to see in each of those scenarios, how do those individuals, the motorist or the little boy, how do their thoughts and their feelings, the environment that they're in, and their behavior all influence one another. So you're just going to make a couple of examples that we will then share in class. And finally, we're going to talk about Julian Rotter, who believed that our behavior is governed by our expectations. Not just the environment, but There's a cognitive process that influences our behavior rooted in what we expect to happen. So in this case, we're talking about, do we expect that we can exert control over our circumstances or over our environment? We refer to this belief or perception of control as locus of control. If an individual has an internal locus of control in a particular scenario, it means they believe they can influence what happens to them. They believe that they make things happen. Whereas if an individual has an external locus of control, they believe that they don't have control over their circumstances. I'm just unlucky. This person is out to get me. No matter what I do, I can't influence my situation. That's an external locus of control. So think of locus like location. Where is our perception of control located? Is it located within us? Do we believe we have control over our environment? Or do we believe that our environment is more influenced by external circumstances that are out of our control? So think about how locus of control can very much influence our motivation and our behavior or our motivation to act. If I have an internal locus of control, my perception of control is such that I think I can change my circumstances. I'm certainly going to be more motivated to try, right, than if I have an external locus of control and I believe that everything's outside of my control. For students sitting in a math class, right, if they have an internal locus of control, they believe that they can work hard and they can influence their learning, right? And maybe, influence their grades, since school, learning is about grades as opposed to just learning, right? We're worried about the grade. Whereas if another student has an external locus of control relative to math, they may feel as though no matter what they do, they're never going to understand it. The teacher's never going to be fair. They're never going to grade them fairly anyway, so why even bother trying? A note I want you to make here is that if you were to see the term locus of control on an FRQ, you have to reference perception of control. So you can't just say so-and-so so-and-so controls their circumstances. You have to say so-and-so believes they have control over their circumstances, because it's not about the literal control that we have, but the amount of control that we perceive that we have.